when was the first time, or how was your experience when you ran into those struggles with, the application not running on Linux because it was Windows based, and Wine is not the easiest platform to work with,
Yeah.
as platforms go for emulating Windows on top of Linux. So did you have much, I mean, I expect you're scouring all the various mail lists and so forth to figure out answers, but did you pose
Yeah.
questions at that time as well? And did you get responses? And what was that experience like?
Yeah. So first, I think that my first, I kind of, it was a kind of a two experience. So the first one was when I tried it initially, it didn't work. I just like, you know what? I'm just gonna get a Windows computer, right? So that was the first reaction I got. The second one was like, you know what? It's like, Windows computer. Having a second thoughts. It's a very expensive. The laptops were so expensive. I was like, you know what? I kind of need to figure something out. And so first was me trying to understand why that didn't work. So then I realized it was a totally different operating system, and not just any Linux distro. It was a very special distro designed for kids and for learning. So very different based, right? So um, then and then I started doing research around the project, and then I saw the Sugar Labs community. I think it was just they just recently left MIT Media Lab. Used to be together with OPC at some point. So then I reached out to the community. I was like, "Hey, I'm trying to run this, and how do I do it?" And so I was like, "Oh, like we don't usually get this use case, right?" So that sort of challenged me as a kid because I always like to get things running, and I spent my whole lunch money on cyber cafes, going to different internet places and scattering around it. And then I mean there was no Stack Overflow and the rest, right? So internet was so like weird. The resources were so weird, and why that was the almost the peak level for Linux this desktop to get to the top, there was still less resources, right? It was so ironic, right? It was like so interesting. So basically, then I think one thing that got me interested was I think it was the way Sugar was designed, the current concept of like viewing source code on like let's say you're in a website, you love this website, just by right clicking and there's an option like depending on the browser you're using, you can just view source code. So that ideology, the first way, at least I would argue and say the first proper way I've seen that implemented real solid was on the Sugar desktop, because every application from the user application down to the system application, you could see source code. Like you could see and you can play with the source code. It was almost as if it was designed for the most crazy kids to do whatever things they want to do. It's like when I started relating with the founders, then I realized that it was a research done at MIT to deliberately design it that way for you to go and break things, not gatekeep like what you typically would experience right now. Like, so I haven't till today, I haven't found any Linux distro or Linux based distro that is that robust, right? That always want to challenge you to do things. So I think when that source code thing started, I started paying attention to how some applications and games were created. And then I realized that, oh, there's this thing called Python. I mean, not Snake, but Python, And then I was like, oh, this is interesting. At that point in time of my life, I was very good with math. So it was like, okay, this is something I probably want to play with. And then I started learning Building 102 Hello World. I think my Hello World was not like, was mostly building Hello Worlds in terms of creating windows, like sample windows, like a button, 2 buttons, 3 buttons. So my Hello World was basically heavily on desktop applications. So by doing so, I then realized that, oh, I could create my own window. I could do a whole lot of things. I could do like some calculations and still has a window. It was like pretty interesting. And then I was out trying to figure out what possible ways I could get our resources. So I would say it was like 20%, 30% resource similarity on the internet, and the remaining 80% was just me like trying my luck. All right. Because when I fixed and got the game rolling, it was the most visited game and most used game in the Sugar Labs community, because it was just it wasn't something that was supposed to be, right? Especially with licensing. At some point, we had to take it off the Play Store because, like I said, this it wasn't properly licensed. It was just a kid playing around things. I mean, thankfully, no one came and sued me but yeah, but yeah. So it was very interesting.